I want to try spending a week without tracking word count at all. So I'm currently drafting my epic fantasy book, and last month it was all about tracking word count because I was trying to do 50,000 words drafted in 31 days. And I felt like, especially by the end, it was hindering me a lot in my writing because I was so focused on my progress. Like it felt like every couple hundred words, I'd be looking down and seeing where I'm at word count wise. It would just draw me out of the story, and it just prevents me from like getting into that flow state. So I figured it's time to go the complete opposite direction and not pay attention to word count at all. The first step will be removing any trace of word count from my drafting software of choice, which is Scrivener. So that may take me a little bit. And then after that, we'll just get writing. But I don't know how productive I'm going to be this week because without word count to push me, because I was writing, over 1,600 words for the majority of the days last month. So without that, maybe I'll be stopping earlier because I naturally get tired or get bored and want to move on to something else before I hit that. Or conversely, I write for longer because I'm not paying attention to, how much progress I'm making. So if I'm feeling good, I'll just like keep going way past that. This week is all going to be about feels. It's all going to be about vibes because you're never going to know what the word count is that I'm doing every day because I'm never going to know. And I'm going to try my best even not to pay attention to time unless there's like things I have to do. So I have to stop to make certain things happen in my day. But we're just not tracking anything. We're just going to go for it and have some fun. Figuring out how to remove any trace of word count from Scrivener, like the active page that I type on, was a little tricky. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it would be a lot faster to do it, but I figured it out. I use the internet, I'm resourceful, and I had a good writing session that afternoon. And I feel like I was moving slower through the story than I might have otherwise. But it was just like a fun time. But it is now a week later, and even though I said I wouldn't give you any like word count updates, I can for this because since that writing session, I think it has been almost exactly, if not a little bit over a week since that first clip. I have done exactly zero writing. I have not opened my writing document. I have not even attempted to do any writing. It's been on the back of my mind of like, oh, maybe I should, but I just haven't got myself to do it. I'm just not in the right headspace for it. I was doing a lot of job applications because I'm currently unemployed. I just finished graduate school last month, but I trusted that eventually I would get the urge again because I've plotted this character's arc and it is really exciting. It is really fun. And I knew that I would be tempted at some point to want to go back to it. And that time is this morning. So I'm going to sit down and get some more writing in. It's a little bit of a bummer that I can't multitask of like, dealing with job applications and all these other things and have the mental space to also write. But, I knew this was a risk when deciding not to track anything, to just go with the flow, because the flow, at least last week, was no flow at all. So it has been another week and I have not given you an update. I don't know what's going on, honestly. I feel like it's in the back of my head. I'm like, "Oh, I should catch up with the video." And then time just flies and then I'm like, "Oh, dang, it's been a really long time." Like, what do I even say at this point? But I do have good news because unlike last week, I actually did some writing this week and I was writing almost every day with a couple of exceptions, and it was feeling really good. Again, I wasn't tracking word count. I wasn't even tracking time really, though I could tell that none of the writing I did any day probably exceeded like 30 minutes. So it was definitely on the easier end of things because without the direction of needing to write whatever 1,600 words or whatever word count for the day, I really had the time to just kind of do whatever I wanted. So some of the days I didn't actually get any drafting words done, and instead I spent time brainstorming how to tie themes together, potentially how future books could tie into this book and how everything will blend, and coming up with all these different ideas. And it was just like really fun. And then even within the chapter that I was writing, so over the past week, I finished chapter 2 and then I'm maybe halfway through chapter 3, And I was coming up with ways of incorporating plot threads that I hadn't thought of before. And I'm really happy with how it's turning out and how it's coming together. It feels like I get to explore the world a lot more in this way and like take my time and really think about what each scene is doing and all the different context that comes behind it. And not that the writing itself is like anything more than usual, but it's just the conversations that have been going on, the different connections between the characters. I'm just really excited for some of the stuff I've added. I think it's really cool. But obviously, this is not anywhere near a fast pace. Doing one chapter over an entire week. There's a lot of chapters to go over this character, and then I have another point of view I still need to write. So at this pace, it would take me an incredibly long time to write the story that I'm definitely going to have to pick up the momentum at some point. And so I'm actually considering now that I'm like starting to feel good and I'm kind of itching to get like more into it, is setting aside specific time to write. So I still like the idea of not looking at word count and keeping those metrics off of my Scrivener page and instead tracking time. So this morning, I'm just about to sit down and do some writing, and I'm hoping to do maybe like an hour, hour and a half. And for the rest of the week, just trying to incorporate maybe an hour every single day just to give myself that time to do it, because without that kind of structure, feel like there's so many other things vying for my attention right now that by the end of the day, like I want to write, but I just like don't have the energy or time, and then it's like time to go to bed. And part of that though is I've been getting back into reading as well, and I've been reading some really good books, and they just inspire me even more with my writing. But then I just keep reading and I don't actually get to writing. So I think for the next couple of days I'm going to try adding that in and seeing how I feel with that, because I don't regret pushing last month. A big part of what instigated me to want to remove word count is because last month I was writing 1,600 words like every single day. I wrote 50,000 words in a month. And I definitely felt a little bit of burnout from that, and not like in a bad way. I don't regret pushing myself in that way, even if it causes kind of a writing lull afterwards. 'Cause it's all part of the fun, it's all part of the process, right? Like if I was a runner, you build up for a big race, you do your race, and then you don't want to do too much for a little bit after. So it's kind of the same vibe of like, it's a fun challenge to push myself, and then there's a little bit of a recovery time after. I think I'm going to take a couple of days and try and incorporate giving myself those time blocks, and then hopefully I'll speak to you again before an entire week has passed. And yeah, we'll conclude this experiment that has become way more convoluted than I anticipated. My progress is accelerating. I have gotten so much done in the last couple of days by blocking out an hour and just focusing on writing. And even in that hour, if I lose my focus and I just stare at the screen or stare at the wall, I eventually get back to it because there's nothing else for me to do. I've committed that time, and I can't tell you how many words are being written because we're not tracking that anymore, but I can just tell from the pace of how much story we're getting through. And we have just entered now the launch into the adventure for the character. They have gone out on their boat and entered a new land. And so things are getting really exciting. Though I'm having a few doubts as to the order of how some information has been revealed in the last couple of chapters. So I think that might need some editing later on. But everything that's on the page, I'm really enjoying. The one downside I'm facing to not tracking word count or not knowing how many words are in a chapter is I'm having a hard time gauging the length of the chapter. There's one in particular where I have a feeling it's just like kind of going on for a bit too long, which might mean that at some point I might have to like break it into two or shift some of it to a later chapter. I'm not really sure. So I'm gonna have to look at the word count of that at some point. But for now, I'm really enjoying staying on track of just committing to a time block and not paying attention to how many words are actually being written. Because at the end of the day, it's really hard for me to even gauge how many words this is going to be. The other point of view character I had, I think they had a 50,000 word around, maybe 45,000 word arc. So I'm assuming that this one's going to be a similar length because I've actually matched their chapters to be about the same amount. But I do think that by removing the word count, I'm just able to focus a lot more on the story rather than this hyper fixation on numbers and progress. And so I think my concluding thoughts is that I really like not looking at word count, at least at this point in, the stage of writing this book, because I just think that I just get so fixated and distracted by the numbers going up. And it makes me rush through specific sections when I know I need to hit whatever word count for the day. But on the flip side, if I'm not careful, not having those tangible goals makes it a lot harder for me to go back to the story. So, having something like a time goal instead really does help to kind of balance that out. But at the end of the day, I think I do need some sort of like physical goal in order to just like motivate myself to keep writing, or else I just spend all my time daydreaming and fantasizing in my own head about the book, not actually getting words down. So, for the next little while, I think I'm going to continue with giving myself time blocks in which to write, but I'm going to continue to not look at word count because I've really been enjoying taking a step back from that. So, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you for hanging out with me. I don't know how I felt about the last couple of weeks of writing. It's been kind of all over the place, but I'm happy to now feel like I'm hitting my stride a little bit more. So I will see you in the next video.